All right, today we are again going to be studying biodiversity. Just a reminder, if we wanted to break the word down into its different parts, bio means life, diversity means variety. So when we're talking about biodiversity, we're talking about the variety of life in an ecosystem or the number of different species in a given area. Remember, high biodiversity generally indicates a very, very healthy area, while low biodiversity will indicate an unhealthy area. For example, let's look at these two different ecosystems. We've got a coral reef on your bottom left-hand corner and a mountainous valley on the right-hand side. Looking at those two, which one do you think has more biodiversity, a coral reef or the mountain valley? While you may not know specifically, hopefully with your eyes you can observe that there are a lot more different species in the coral reef than we see here in the mountain valley picture. We don't see any mammals, like any large mammals in my mountain valley. You can assume that there's bacteria and stuff in the soil, and we've got grass here, probably a couple different species of grass and weeds. But we don't see a lot of animals, so this system might not be as healthy as the coral reef. We've got a bunch of different life here in the coral reef. I can see different colors or different types of coral, as well as some different types of algae and fish here in this one picture. So my coral reef definitely has a lot more biodiversity than my mountain valley. Factors that affect biodiversity, climate for sure. So remember, we want, like when we studied our climate change unit, we learned that certain organisms like a certain climate. If my climate changes at all, that can affect my biodiversity. Not only that, usually we find more biodiverse areas or more biodiverse ecosystems in warmer areas. Generally, our colder climates aren't as biodiverse, although that's not always true. The area or size of an area can affect our biodiversity. Generally, the more space we have, the more organisms we can support. That's why habitat fragmentation or decreasing habitat of an ecosystem is such an issue, because we're making it smaller and smaller, making it harder for that biodiversity to form. Niche diversity, we really haven't talked about niche, but a niche is a specific habitat of an organism or a specific place that they fill. It has to do with the habitat, so where do they like to live? Like, do they like the tundra? Do they like the desert? But not only that, where do they fall on the food web? Are they a producer, like a plant? Are they perhaps an herbivore, maybe an omnivore? That's niche diversity, can affect our biodiversity. Do we have a lot of niches, a lot of different places that I can put organisms, or do I only really have a couple? Genetic diversity also plays a part in biodiversity. So I might have the same of a species, the population of the species, but do I have a lot of genetic diversity between the two? Do I have a lot of different colors? If you think of your own diversity as humans here, we have a bunch of different students in the classroom of different shapes, sizes, races. They're tall, they're short. We have students with African American heritage as well as Native American. We've got Caucasian students in here, perhaps even Latin American heritage. Not only that, but my students are all different sizes. Some of them are really tall, some of them are really short like me. Some of them are male, some of them are female, some of them have blue eyes, some of them have brown eyes. So the genetic diversity are those different traits, or the way we display the different traits. If you look at our classroom, we can see a pretty good view of our genetic biodiversity. And then extinction of species also plays a part in my biodiversity. So the more species that I lose or that become extinct, the less biodiversity I have. I hope that is pretty understandable. If I kill a bunch of species off, I'm going to have less. When we talk about biodiversity, we use the word species a lot. Species is a group of similar organisms that have similar characteristics to each other and can breed with each other. Usually we have a scientific species name, like humans are Homo sapiens, so we use the genus and the species name. If you're talking about purple pitcher plant, actually I can't remember that one, but like yeast is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Saccharomyces is the genus name, the species name is Cerevisiae. Cerevisiae is the actual species. Species, again, the key here, we can breed with one another and we have viable offspring. So like we know that a horse and a donkey can breed with another. We got a mule, but mules are sterile, meaning that mules can't reproduce. Threatened species are species that are endangered. are species that could become endangered soon. We learned about this. That means that our scientists have identified that their population is decreasing. They see that there might be an issue, and they're watching it. When a species moves from threatened to endanger, we know that the population has continued to decline. There's something going on. We really need to watch them and put things into effect that help protect the species. Endangered species are at risk of becoming extinct. We know that extinction means that we have no more of the species. We can be what we call functionally extinct, meaning that they can't reproduce on their own. We talked about the ginkgo trees and how all the ginkgo trees that we see in the world now are male species because we got rid of the females. So if we want a new ginkgo tree, we have to do asexual reproduction to get one, which isn't considered functionally living anymore. They're functionally extinct. And then we have actually extinct things like the dodo bird, and a lot of our marine mammals are now extinct, and many of them are endangered. Here are some of our endangered species today. The Komodo dragon, which by the way can run at 3.3 meters per second, which is a pretty fast pace. Definitely wouldn't want to get caught up in a Komodo dragon's race or whatnot. Desert tortoise is an endangered species. Gorilla, snow leopard, jaguars, pandas, the bison. AAs, I actually have never heard of that type. It looks like a lemur or a monkey. Humpback whales are an endangered species, and then the Indian python. There are many, many, many more. These are just a few. I forgot to say elephant and gray wolf and chinchilla, but these are just a few of those endangered species that are at risk of being extinct. That means that there are usually laws or special treatments in place for these organisms so that they can try and grow their population so that they don't become extinct. Like, for example, it's illegal to hunt a humpback whale. I can't go out and kill it for sport. It's actually, you get pretty much quite a bit of trouble if you accidentally kill a humpback whale. It's pretty hard to accidentally kill a whale. So there are things in place that aim to protect these organisms. Economic value. So a lot of people said, I told you one time, my friend Max said, why do I care about the animals? It's not like they're doing anything for me anyways. I don't see like a elephant in my everyday life, but a lot of them provide food for people, or they're a vital part of the food chain. So maybe we don't eat that organism, but we eat something that organism, or that eats that organism, something like that. They supply raw materials for clothing, medicine, and other products. A lot of our plants we talk about for economic value and medical importance, like the Pacific yew plant helps create an anti-cancer drug. That's an endangered species right now. If that perhaps goes away, then that anti-cancer drug is going to go with it. Not only that, but ecosystems provide jobs for many people, not just like park rangers and scientists, but things like people who, I mean, if you just think of pine straw, like I know that that's not a ecosystem that's in trouble or anything, but if I want to farm pine straw, I need the tree to be able to do it, so I can't cut down the pine tree. It needs to drop the leaves. That would be a job. Biodiversity varies from place to place on Earth. We know that we live in a pretty biodiverse area, actually. If we move kind of westerly to the state, it becomes less and less diverse, and then as we move up north as well. Wild organisms are a source of beauty and recreation. We like to look at them. We like to see them. Diversity on Earth. I want you to look at this graph. Hopefully you can put it into your notes using the Google drawing feature. Insects make up, if not, you're just going to type in the facts here. Insects make up about 75% of the diversity on Earth. Plants make up 20% of the biodiversity on Earth, and then animals and other organisms make up about 4%. So a lot of those species that we think of are generally animals, and then plants. We hardly ever think about insects, and then we hardly ever even think about like bacteria and the single-celled organisms, but they're all out there. So I just want you to remember that. And by the way, beetles are the most speciosious animal, meaning that they have a bunch of different species. And I just think that's an interesting fact. There are many more species of insects than plants and animals of other species. That's kind of what this paragraph is telling us. A keystone species is a species that influences the survival of many other species in an ecosystem. Bees are one example, so think about how the bees are pollinators, and without bees we wouldn't be able to pollinate our flowers. They are important. They do more than just live and eat and die. And generally, everything plays an influence on the other species of an ecosystem, but a keystone species plays an even bigger part. That means that when we don't have this species in an ecosystem, we don't see an ecosystem that's as healthy, or the ecosystem can't exist at all. No one really knows how many species have not been discovered yet. They discover new species all the time, especially when you start thinking about all the microscopic and single-celled organisms that are out there. My example of a keystone species that I like to think about are our sea otters. So when a sea otter is in the ecosystem, they eat sea urchins. And because they eat the sea urchin, which is what they normally do, the kelp forests are able to live and be very, very healthy. They don't eat all the sea urchins, but they help keep that population in check, make sure it doesn't grow without bounds. If, say, a hunter comes along and kills all of the sea otters in an ecosystem, which they can't, by the way, it's illegal now, but if they do by chance, the sea urchin population grows without bounds. That means it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows, and nothing is really there to take the population down except old age from the sea urchin, so dying of natural causes. What happens then is the sea urchin population will eat the kelp at an unsustainable rate, meaning that, as you can see in the picture on the right-hand side, my kelp will cease to exist. It will no longer be there because the sea urchins have eaten it all. The sea otter is considered a keystone species because without it, the ecosystem wouldn't be healthy. You can see that an overgrazed kelp doesn't look healthy. So this otter is really, really important to the ecosystem. We call it keystone because it is so important. There are other species that are like this, like bees, as well as the gray wolves of Yellowstone, which we're actually going to spend a whole day talking about next week. Ecological value, so there's a pretty big science value of having a very high biodiversity. All species of an ecosystem are connected to one another. That means when we have a high biodiversity, we have the right connections. Things have lots of different varieties of food. Think about your fridge. When you only have one thing to eat, you don't really have that much of a variety. But when you have salad to eat, or you could eat tater tots, or you could eat a grilled cheese sandwich, you've got a lot of variety, a lot of different things to eat. That means if by chance the cheese was no longer there, you could eat something else. But if all you had in the fridge was grilled cheese and you didn't have any cheese, then you would have to go hungry. Species are dependent upon one another for food and shelter. A change that affects one can affect them all. When we start studying food webs and food chains, we're really going to see how that plays a part, especially when we talk about food webs. And that is the final piece of your notes. Let me make sure. Because for some reason I feel like we're missing one. Oh no, we got it all. All right, have a great day, guys. Turn this into Canvas. If you have any issues, let me know. I know yesterday there were some issues with the copying of the PowerPoint, but it should have turned out just fine, hopefully. All right, guys, have a great day.